Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you with me today and to cover a topic which I think is rather timely. I've covered part of this in previous presentations, but I had some more material to add, and I just thought it was such an important topic that we should go with it. The topic is perfect health and old age. Um, in our waking state of life, the clock is ever ticking, and no matter what we do, we are gradually getting older. Aging is a natural process, and I'm not just talking about the end of the cycle, even the beginning of the cycle. From the time the cell is fertilized and starts to divide and forms a embryo, and then a no, I was going to forget that word, um, fetus. So and then it goes on and develops into a baby, and goes through all the stages of childhood and then early adulthood, middle adulthood, late adulthood, and finally old age. And as we go through all of those stages, those are a natural progression of the living organism. Why does this happen? Mainly because we're physical bodies. We have physical bodies. That's how we identify ourselves. That's where we locate ourselves. I'm here in this body. Even if we're having some considerably good experiences of unboundedness and non-localization of our being, we still go and we have a body, and that body is gradually getting older. And so the first point I have to make is don't get upset about that. That's a really big point. I'm wrestling with this myself. I think it's an important part of evolution. When we're young, we look forward to being older. We look forward to, the rights and responsibilities of adulthood. And then we go through adulthood in the various stages, and we feel good about some of the things that we're able to accomplish or to do, and who we are and who we become. And when I say become, I mean both as people and spiritually, how we're evolving and developing in that domain. And the great joy of living is that we continue to grow and evolve and to gain a different perspective on life and a different mastery over life and of what we have. And for most of us, that continues into adulthood, late adulthood. But eventually we move into a stage where our capabilities for physical activity and for mental activity begin to diminish and progressively diminish. And we may become wiser, but we are not as capable of both the physical things in life and the intellectual or cognitive things in life. But it is possible to maintain a high level of activity. I get to tell a story about that because I think you all know I play basketball. And I play basketball because it keeps me busy. It gives me good physical exercise and an opportunity to have social interaction and, to keep my body vigorous. And I've been disappointed recently because I am not as vigorous as I once was. And that's a very real thing. I am not as quick. I'm a rather short person, only 5'8". And so being quick was one of the ways I compensated for my short stature. And I'm just not that quick anymore. And so people who are taller than I am are having a field day at my expense. And it's not frankly, not as much fun as it usually is. If I play with a group of people who are not such good players, and you have to understand, they're all younger than I am. The fellow who was older than I has not been seen for many months. And so I am now the oldest player. And and the reason I was telling you the story is I derive a certain respect for showing up, not because of the quality of my play, but just for showing up. And every once in a while, I do something really good, and then it kind of surprises everybody, and they kind of go like, "Oh, he's still got a little left." But the continued participation is important to me, not just for the physical exercise and even just for the social contact, but because it means I'm still youthful and vital. And so I am wrestling to a considerable degree now with the aging, that I'm becoming old, and even refer to myself occasionally in public as old. And because that's the reality of what I'm experiencing. And so I'm humbled by that aging process, but recognizing that, and it's happening very gradually, and recognizing that it's an opportunity for further growth. And part of that growth is a decreasing attachment to the things of life, the body, and to just the stuff of life, material possessions and such. For instance, I'm not terribly sentimental about things I used to be sentimental about. And I have, I'm going to call them artifacts. I hope you think it's funny. I think it's funny. I have artifacts of my youth and my life, pictures, mostly pictures, and some objects. And, when I look at them, I go like, yeah, that was the time, but that time is past. And I don't get very sentimental about it. It's kind of peculiar. And and particularly when I see things, and I'll go like, oh yeah, that was an interesting time, or I learned certain things, or it was a developmental time I did certain stuff, right? And developed in certain ways. And then I go like, but I don't really need to keep this object any longer. It's not necessary. And I have a lot of stuff, a lot of art and things to put up on the walls. I'm still not done doing that because I can't make up my mind. Because I look at something and say, well, that's beautiful or interesting in a way, or it reminds me of something that was important to me at one time. And then it just loses any energy. There's no energy behind it. And you go like, oh, maybe I put it up, maybe I won't. One of the things I do is to scan, particularly flat objects, things that can be scanned, and put them in a screensaver. And I have a lot of the family photos in the screensaver. So I see the kids developing at different ages. Right now, it's the grandkids mainly. I have a few pictures of myself and my sister when we were young and at different stages of our lives. And it's fun to look and see how we've grown, how we've changed over the years. And that growth is very, very important. So I've dwelled on this for a little while because I want to help everyone let go of the notion that they're getting old, even though it's right there in front of us, right in the mirror, right? It's right there in front of us in the mirror. We're getting older, and there's no doubting that. So what do we do with that aging? How are we supposed to live with the inevitable consequences of growing older? Now, as we grow older, each of us experiences certain problems. I've had two major ones in my life. One, I developed cataracts to the point where I would not be allowed to drive a car. And as I said to the tech, I can see the signs. I can read them. I said, I can read the signs, which was true. But I couldn't pass the test. And while there may be an imperfection in the testing mechanism, I am not going to quibble. I needed my cataracts removed, and they were, and now I can see. And it was like that part of me grew old. I did a whole bunch. I used a couple of different eye preparations that were supposed to make cataracts disappear. And of course, they didn't work. They might have slowed it a little bit. It's hard to know because I had cataracts for a long, long time. But I couldn't pass the eye test. at the driver's license station. And so I was relegated to getting my cataracts repaired. So that got done. And in some sense, it's like something on your car. You have a car, you drive it for some years, and a part wears out. The part wears out, and you replace the part, and then the car works fine. And so I thought of my cataracts as just gotten old, and I had to just accept that fact. And I had, for many years, had a problem with my mitral valve. It was leaky, a very common problem. And then I developed atrial fibrillation. What was that? A little over a year ago. And that very much compromised my well-being. The doctors were actually more upset about it than I was. I found the best treatment for that was exercise. I just needed to get back in shape. That was at the end of COVID. And not that COVID's actually completely gone, but the end of the epidemic in our response to it. And so I was able to get back out on the basketball court. And lo and behold, even with the atrial fibrillation, I was able to play basketball. But did eventually get a repair procedure last September. And again, same attitude about it. Wore out, got to fix it. And so while the operation itself is quite a big deal, the idea behind it is very simple. You got a part that's worn out, it needs repair, it needs to be not replaced. They have a way of fixing it to make it work better. And the doctors are very satisfied with the outcome, which is all in technical numbers, but it works. I've not been that satisfied. I'm not finding that I have a lot more energy than I had beforehand. I'm not sorry I went through the procedure, but I have to say, been slow rehabilitation, even though I'm playing basketball now, usually 3 times a week. So that's an example of how we deal with aging. We do things that maintain us physically. We exercise, we eat a good diet, we get plenty of sleep, and we may need more. We may need more sleep. I need more sleep right now. But that's getting better, fortunately. But anyway, we attend to the things that our body needs in order to maintain itself as well as it can, to maintain itself as well as it can. I think I repeat that because I think that really needs to soak in when we look at ourselves and we look in the mirror and then go like, you're old, you're getting old. And you go, I'm going to do the best I can to maintain myself. We don't have to go crazy about it, but we do need to attend to it. And we need to attend to any of those things that may relate to our karma. And when I say karma here, I don't just mean from yesterday, but particularly karma from our childhood and karma from past lives, which have a lot to do with our life purpose here and what kinds of experiences we have and what kinds of illnesses we have. And sometimes we need to resort to doing things that are going to change or alter the outcome of that and restore us to better health so that we can continue on in a vital and happy way. The first thing that we got to do, I think this is really important. First thing we have to do is accept reality. I can't emphasize this enough, and this is basically the whole point of the first part of my presentation here, is we have to accept reality. If we don't accept reality, we're not going to deal with reality, and then things are just going to get worse. So one of the things we have to do is accept that, oh, gee, I'm developing certain problems. And whether they're disease or just wearing out doesn't matter. I still have to attend to them. That's my key point here. Even though it may not be disease, it may just be that parts of us are wearing out. I have to attend to it. Now, you can put things off for a long time. I put my cataracts off for years. I put my heart off for years until I actually developed a situation that basically demanded attention. And then I took care of it. But it's not necessary to do that. If a part's broke, fix it. So accept reality, really important thing. Enjoying an ideal daily routine is very good. Yeah, we've worked hard through our lives. We may have developed some rather unhealthy habits, staying up late, eating big meals, particularly at night, which is not so good. Not taking enough vacation, not spending enough time meditating and transcending because we were too busy. Or we weren't having the best experiences, which is basically saying you're not giving yourself the opportunity, or that there's a lot of stress there that needs to be cleared out. So you might as well get the job done. One thing that I found very helpful and very necessary is to frequently listen to Maharshi's lectures. Being in Fairfield, unfortunately, I've got ready access, but even those who are out in the world, who are TM City practitioners, the advanced program, have ready access to Maharshi's lectures, as do regular meditators who can access them online. And then, of course, Maharshi wrote many, many books, all of which are deep, deep, deep with knowledge. By the way, the deepest knowledge is in the footnotes. That's just from coming from a faculty member. It was one of those things that we learned, was that you always read the footnotes, because that's where the deepest knowledge was. If there are problems, and here I'm talking psychology, if we are carrying around baggage, it's the common word today, it's a great word. If we're carrying baggage, we may need some help putting down that baggage. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and we'll do that in the group clearing session. We'll actually try to put down some of our baggage. But that's where working with someone maybe helps point out the nature of your baggage. People are often pretty blind to their baggage. I know I am. And so I have to dive very deeply and use techniques to get to the heart of things that are going on inside of me that may be producing physical effects. And whenever things are not going well, it's very good to look and see where the baggage is. Now, one of these places there's a lot of places where you can get information about your baggage. Physicians can sometimes be helpful. Alternative providers and healers of whatever stripe may be very useful to us in that context. And then there's, of course, Maharshi Jyotish and Yagya. We don't always think about those things. And sometimes we go like, oh, I can't really afford to go to a physician, or I can't afford a astrology consultation or a Yagya performance. Yagyas are actions that enliven natural law and change the destiny, change the karma. And I've seen miracles from yagyas when people were very sick and in the hospital. And they can be very useful for prevention. And in fact, the best use for astrology, Vedic astrology, Maharshi's astrology, is to know what's coming, so you can take measures like Yagya to avert those dangers. And then doing all those physical things that help to keep us healthy, again, are very, very important. Now, I have to throw in a little admonition that I've thrown out many times. And that is, we've got to be careful not to blame the planets for our misery. The planets show potentialities, and they may show that we may have a difficult time or a health challenge at a particular time, and that may actually come to fruition if we don't try to head it off by doing the yagyas before the time that our karma is due. But if we do the yagyas at a time when the karma is coming due, we can ameliorate those effects and make life smoother and happier and healthier. And they're very, very powerful effects. Yagi is done by one or two or three people. May have some benefit. It's generally been my experience, and that's not a scientific observation. It's just anecdotal. Anecdotal is the official word for you just had an experience. You haven't really done a study. My anecdotal experience is that cheap yagyas produce small effects. That may be very adequate if you just have a simple health problem and the karma is not too, shall we say, heavy, not too heavily imposed. But if it is heavily imposed, the yagyas may not be effective. And of course, when you're working with prevention, that which does not show up, you don't know about. You don't know you prevented it. You only know that you prevented, or you only know when you've helped something is if you see a dramatic change in a bad situation. If you're in a good situation and it just stays good, then everything is, there's no contrast. There's no way to say, oh, that was really beneficial. So a certain amount of trust may be in order. Dealing with physical problems, you can use any kind of healer that appeals to you. And any method that seems useful for the condition. I do energy work for people, as well as dietary and lifestyle consultations. The energy work can be very useful. Strangely, I've had a number of what they call periapical abscesses, which are infections at the root of a tooth. And they can be very painful. And doctors dentists will almost always tell you that you need a root canal done. The people that have come to me, and I wish more of them would, because it's kind of fun for me to do it, generally get away without having a root canal. We heal up the infection. There's still a hole in the bone because that takes a long time to grow back. But heal up the infection and they don't have any pain and they don't have any problem and they keep their tooth for, well, as far as I know, for a long, long, long time. So that's just one of those things. And I use that example because it's such a mundane example, unless, of course, you're having a toothache. Then it's not mundane. It hurts. It really hurts. But it's just one of those things like, even a toothache, can be taken care of. Sore muscles and joints and other kinds of problems, and things that come with aging. And for things like that, again, diet and exercise are very important because those things often result from a diet that's not well matched to the body and the digestion that may be very weak. And of course, some people just have, inherited very weak digestive systems, very weak nervous systems, where they're very sensitive to anything, easily stressed. And so they need to be on a good routine and so on. And unfortunately, those people are often the ones who are not on a good routine. And so it perpetuates their distress. For emotional problems, and most diseases have some emotional basis. There's some that seem to be purely karma, but that karma usually has an emotional basis. I regard even things that relate to, say, curses, and I deal with curses commonly. Those are very much emotional. A person curses another person because they're angry, they're hurt, and they're angry. And so out of their frustration and their pain and their suffering, they cast a spell that injures others. And they need not necessarily be real powerful sort of people or know anything about what they're doing. Just by sheer will can cause karmic injury and through cursing. And then cursing used to be quite an art. That is, people learned how to actually do it. That's an unfortunate thing because the person who casts the curse suffers as does the person who is cursed. So I have to fix them both. And when you're doing that from some past lifetime thing, I can tell you that's a lot of fun to be able to go back and work with the energies that are in the present. Energies are in the present. That's the only thing that exists. It's what's here now from what came from before. But so what you're doing is looking through, I didn't think of a good analogy. I was going to say looking through a telescope, but I don't think that conveys the right sense of it. You're looking at a continuous unfolding of energy and over time. And you don't have to look at the time element. You just look at where the energy was at different times and where it is today. And so you can figure out where it came from and then clean it up. So it's very powerful stuff. For emotional problems, the emotional freedom technique is peculiarly effective. It's peculiar because on the one, that's the tapping technique, and it's peculiarly effective if you use the right words with it. Affirmations. The affirmations have to be carefully chosen. There are written formulas, written things you say for many, many problems, but they're not very effective because you're not adapting to the nuances of the influence that is producing your problem. I should say influences, because sometimes you'll be working on one thing and you start to get it cleaned up, and a new aspect will emerge, and you'll shift the way your approach to the thing, your affirmations. That doesn't make much sense unless you actually have the experience. And if you have the experience, it's absolutely remarkable. And once you get the emotional freedom technique down, you can use it to solve emotional problems very, very quickly. I think I've told you I tend to use it in the morning when I awaken because I've been dreaming and I've had my baggage is fresh. And so I can go, even though I'm experiencing whatever it is I'm experiencing, and then just go through the routine. Inner relationship focusing, which I've shown you in many, many webinars, is a very, very valuable technique. It's extremely simple and beautifully conceived. And the basic idea is that we tune into the parts of us inside that are suffering, and we acknowledge that they're there. We don't try to change them or get rid of them, which is very important. We have to let them exist and let them express themselves in a benign way. That is, they have to just be what they are rather than tearing our body apart while they do it. And it's an extremely effective approach. I use it frequently. There's another technique, the option method, which I don't use very often, but it's very good, and it provides has provided me a kind of theoretical basis that gives me options for dealing with situations that one might not have regularly thought of. These are becoming quite well known in the popular, I'm going to say literature, but it's the whole field of alternative healing. And not everybody uses it in the formal way the option method does, but the fundamental ideas there are that we have options. We always have options. And we choose a different option. We choose a different path. Okay. I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to say here in this introduction. Just to summarize very briefly, while perfect health may not be possible as we get much older, we can deal with it. And so the first thing is that we absolutely accept what is happening. We accept the reality of where we are and look to see what the causes are. Where did this come from? And then take steps to ameliorate the situation so that we can go on. And that's true whether the problem is just a matter of aging and wearing out, or it's karma that's coming due, that's producing some serious, perhaps very serious problem, health challenge for us. And then we take the steps that are necessary to make it better. And so the attitude is very important here. And this is really what I want to wrap up with. The attitude that we have towards infirmities and maladies and sources of suffering as we get older needs to have a neutral flavor to it. It's just there. Oh, it's there. I have to deal with it. I have to deal with it. And that goes, excuse me, that goes along with that evolutionary process that I was describing a little bit, of becoming less attached to the way things used to be and to gradually let go. It's usually necessary to do that gradually because our attachments are pretty intense, and it's painful to let go. It's very scary, and painful, and to gradually become less attached to this real world. Eventually, we will become completely unattached to the world and we'll pass on. And the ideal passing, we move through stages until we reach a point where we completely accept that we're not going to go on any longer. Now, you got to get rid of, in order to pass smoothly, all that psychological baggage about, oh, I don't have any purpose here on earth anymore, and nobody loves me, and I'm not the center of attention any longer. I go to a party and I just sit there because I'm too tired to do anything, and nobody cares about an old man or an old woman. And so, you have to deal with all of that ego attachment to what the life was, and look forward to a life of non-attachment, that afterlife, which we're learning more and more about. And many of us have had experiences with those who passed on, that it's very helpful to being reassured that it's actually, it really is a good state to be in, and to be enjoyed, and that we should enter into that when the time comes most joyfully, and be able to say, oh, my time in this body is done. It's completed. I've done what I needed to do. So with that, I'll invite any questions or comments. Put them in the chat, if you will. The chat is working. I don't have that problem anymore. I found out what my mistake was. I had the wrong thing checked. And there were two places you had to check it. And I checked one, but not the other. So I'll give it just a few seconds. The next webinar will be May 9th. And I believe the topic of that webinar, unless something dramatic happens between now and as we get near that date, it will be attending to the heart. And here you might call this lecture Perfect Health, Old Age, and the Body. And the next one is going to be attending to the heart. And we've been attending to the heart in many, many lessons, presentations that I've done. I have some new ideas, and so we'll cover that hopefully on May 9th. Those of you who've paid to attend this can get a $25 discount on a 3-session program if you sign up by the end of April. I have March on my note here. It's April. It is March. No, it's April. This is April. Whew. Okay. All right. I'm seeing no comments, so we're going to end.